Council reviewed the closed session minutes from regular meeting held June 10th, 2019. Council reviewed one matter regarding an organizational review report for the Owen Sound Police Services and received the report for information purposes. That's what happened in closed session. We started about 6:15, and now we're coming back into the open session now. I note at this point that all councillors are present, with the exception of Councillor Dodd, who is unable to attend tonight. Seeking disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Go ahead, Councillor Thomas.
Thanks, Your Worship. I am declaring pecuniary interest on item 12B, the Riverside Reunion, as my wife is the new manager of the Owen Sound Farmers Market.
Thank you. Congratulations. Yeah, we're doing it backwards. Any other disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none other. Jumping back to number 4 is a call for additional items. Seeing Councillor Kepke.
Thank you, Worship. One item respecting the Rogers Communications Project, and if time permits, a little report on AMO.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Tamming.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, if time permits, I'd love to make a little report, a very brief report on our visits to the AMO convention.
AMO. Anyone else? Anyone down that way? And report in a couple of things, including AMO, if time permits. Any staff? I forgot to look your way, as usual. Thank you. So now, number 6, confirmation of council minutes from August 12th.
Thank you, Worship. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Hamley, that the minutes of the regular council meeting held on August 12, 2019, as printed, be adopted.
All in favor? That is carried. 6B.
Moved by myself, second by Councillor Hamley, that the minutes of the closed session of regular council meeting held on June 10, 2019, as printed, be adopted.
All in favor? That is carried. Number 7.
Moved by myself, second by Councillor Hamley, that City Council now move into Committee of the Whole to consider public meetings, deputations and presentations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports of city staff, consent agenda, committee minutes, matters postponed, motions for which notice was previously given, and additional business.
All in favor? That is carried. So we're now in Committee of the Whole. Number 8, public meetings. We have none listed. Number 9, deputations. We have Chief Ambrose of the Owen Sound Police Services with regard to organizational review update. We also have his inspectors and members of the Police Services Board here in attendance. So Chief Ambrose, welcome.
Thank you. So I'd also like to point out the Vice President of the Owen Sound Police Association is here as well.
Thank you.
So coming back to Council with the review of the requested review by Mr. Levac that was completed in June 2018. Just for so the Council knows what the Police Services Board request was, that the mandate was to capture and identify immediate opportunities to increase efficiencies while maintaining or improving effectiveness, as well as providing recommendations for future considerations as the service, its members, and the community it serves as they evolve over the next 10 years. I would like to point out that he acknowledged that the police service is an efficiently managed organization that provides adequate and effective policing to the city of Owen Sound despite 2 primary challenges. I can do it this way. Oh, there we go. So one of the issues obviously is that there's a regional commercial and social hub which draws non-residents to the city, thereby masking the population that's actually policed. And the second one is the high number and complexity of mental health calls for service that are received by the service. And he also noted that the nature of the work of the members in the service are intricately intertwined to a point where it's difficult, if not impossible, to identify a single change in one area of the service that would not have implications in at least one other area. Therefore, while the report focuses on the following list of headings, the discussion of each opportunity includes the necessary identification of ancillary issues, opportunities in other areas of the service. So, there are 22 primary recommendations. It's estimated there was an estimated $225,000 in savings as a result of the operational and structural changes that were recommended in the review. 17 of those 22 recommendations have been acted upon, either implemented or they are in progress. Some of the recommendations could not be implemented because they contradicted themselves or were contrary to operational procedures or the collective agreement. So those are still being considered but won't be moving forward at the present time. The results of the analysis in the complete report were presented to Council on May 27th and then reissued again this week. So since May 2019, as a matter of update, there's been some continued implementation. The civilianization of the Community Services Officer role, basically it delivers the same program at a lower cost and where you don't need a bush/class constable. Many of the other services in the province have civilianized the role, and some grant funding became available for that coincided with the implementation of this process. We're still waiting for approval on that grant funding, but it's anticipated that it will be here shortly. It was supposed to start in March, at the beginning of this fiscal year for the government. Hiring process is now complete, and there's a new employee starting in September. The service review identified a cost of $45,000, a cost saving of $45,000 for this initiative, but it didn't consider the reallocation of the uniform position to a mental health role, so there's actually resulting in increased cost that is going to be partially offset by the grant funding for the position. The mental health officer role, there's a funding and opportunity through a grant, as I mentioned. The full explanation is provided in the accompanying report that was requested by Council in May. The service review estimated a future policing cost avoidance of $300,000 as a result of better handling calls. And that doesn't include the benefits to the client by not being apprehended and taken to the hospital when it's not necessary, and as well the medical system and those associated costs to the province and the municipality by having them come in, enter through the emergency department. We're partnering with CMHA Grey Bruce to implement this program. As well, the civilianization of the forensic identification of property position that was already implemented between prior to our last meeting, but wasn't included in the review because it took place after that, and that resulted in a cost savings of approximately $90,000 and reduced overtime and civilianization. So we got getting into some cost comparisons. The OPP providing the same level of service as the Owen Sound Police Service. So during the costing discussions in 2016, they provided an estimate to provide the same policing levels to the city during the transition phase of or the first 3 years of the implementation of the contract. Whereas from year 4 or onward, then they use their costs calculated based on the calls for service in those first 3 years. So using the provincial costing method. And the service delivery is provided at the OPP level. So if you look at the Owen Sound Police Services costs, in 2016, the budget was 7.15, the actual was 7.069. 2017, the actual was 7.2, where it was budgeted at 7.31. 2018, the actual was 7.208, where the budget was 7.452, and this year the budget is 7.631. Obviously, we don't have the actual yet for this year. So, OPP costs using the 2000 staffing proposal numbers, the numbers that they provided. The 2018 estimate was $8.577 million. The 2019 they estimated in 2017 to be $8.63 million, and using the numbers that on their most current costing on their website for 2019, it would actually work out to $8.944 million using those same employee costs. So using the actual numbers from the budgets, as I said, the actual costs for Owen Sound Police Service for the comparison from 2017 have decreased, while the actual costs for the OPP policing compared to the OPP estimates for the first 3 years have increased. You see a chart there indicating that in the green is the cost savings and reduction, and the red is the cost increases compared to the estimates from the 2017 or 2016 OPP staffing. So I think it's important to note that the estimates for the police service, Owen Sound Police Service, the budgets and actual are lower than the estimates. And despite loss of dispatch revenue of 2 contracts and the addition of another civilian position over that time period. So with all the costs of the OPP trending higher than predicted and all the costs for Owen Sound trending lower than predicted, the actual cost savings that were projected over a 10-year period would certainly be affected. Increases in calls for service and local crime severity index for both violent and non-violent crimes for service would also affect the predicted annual costs for years 4 to 10, creating increased cost and decrease in savings. Our violent crime index rose considerably this year when it was released just recently by Stats Canada. Also to consider is the fact that the 2017 estimate was based on 2013 and to the 2015 call volume, and the calls for service have increased significantly since that time. One other thing that the OPP have received a significant funding cut in 2019 and are requesting the Treasury Board review the municipal policing costing model. I have no idea where that's going to go, but it's something to consider. One of the things that makes it difficult to do a direct comparison and why the OPP implement their costing after the first 3 years is they do capture the stats differently than we do. UCR coding is done for Stats Canada, and the requirements for Stats Canada are the primary UCR code is identified. So if there's an incident, that's the primary code, and that's what gets put in, and it's required for Stats Canada purposes to do that. The OPP, they have a group of people that code, the UCR coders, and they code for 2 purposes. They code for billing purposes and for Stats Canada, and meet Stats Canada purposes. And obviously they will code differently using their UCR coding. Years 4 to 10, the OPP model switches after 3 years to the provincial billing formula. There's an estimate tool that requires the entry of CAD data for a 3-year period. The OPP don't switch over until after 3 years, so they can capture the data using their formats. An apples method of comparing data from OSPS to OPP is difficult. That's why they don't just automatically take the data from the police service where they're coming in and start implementing it at their costs. Using the estimator tool resulted in a similar cost estimate for the projections from 2017, but only captured a portion of the incident types and highlighted a variation in the UCR coding, as I explained, between the 2 services. Various incident types used by OPP, by Owen Sound Police Service, aren't covered by the OPP, and many of the calls for service would be covered in the base service agreement through the OPP costing. So the OPP currently calculated cost.
Chief Ambrose, I'm just going to interrupt you there. We got a report from Mr. Levac back in really looked at the OPP comparison. So I think more what we were looking for is after we got his report and we went to the police force, I'm talking 2 hats, this is still the police board of course, but from the council's point of view, council really asked the board to look at the service analysis of the Owen Sound costs. That's really more the report we're looking for. Once we get into OPP and different things here, it's really going back to that report that we've already received.
Okay.
So I wonder if you want to move ahead and focus more on the city stuff specifically.
Yeah. So then moving forward, to the service review, it identified that regionalization and amalgamation of policing services would allow for savings on an economy of scale. The estimated savings were approximately $1 million. We have had initial discussions about cost sharing services and cost savings that have taken place with the Hanover Police Service. There's some sharing of training has already occurred, and there's more planned for 2020. West Grey Police are also interested in discussing cost savings. This should be discussed further in the future and has the potential for significant savings, especially if services can reduce minimum staffing levels at off-peak hours. That's obviously something that's down the road. Ultimately, joining services would produce the most of savings, but significant savings can still be realized for each service while we're still remaining independent. Drugs and CIB were one of the things that it's mentioned in the Mr. Levac's review, and the need to either add staff or combine with CIB. Staffing levels permitted, we would like to put the 2nd member back into the drug team. Substance abuse and associated crime obviously fuel much of the increase in calls for service and the crime severity index. Substance use and associated social disorder calls, as well as traffic complaints, are the two most significant issues and complaints received by members of the public, or from members of the public, and probably to your phones as well. Dedicated resources to both units have a far more significant impact on the problem, and the OPP assigned their CIB and drug investigations from the regional level and operate on a priority basis, not by geography. So there was no significant value to the community attributed in the Levac report, but I believe that I wanted to highlight the fact that there probably should have been. Modernization and civilianization, it's always changing, and the majority of calls for service are non-criminal in nature. Civilianization, such as the identification and community services officer, are recent examples of implementing those to try and save money while still delivering the same levels of service at a lower cost. The mental health liaison position is going to be implemented to provide better service and reduce repeat calls for service for those members of our community who are in crisis. And we continually review the roles that police are conducting and try to determine efficiencies and alternatives to frontline policing response. We're trying to provide the most efficient and effective service to the community in the most cost-effective manner. So the service review identified a $45,000 savings to the civilianization of the community services officer. This would be accurate if the uniform position were to be eliminated from the Owen Sound Police Service, and that would require a Section 40 PSA hearing. The review also identified a potential future cost savings of $300,000 with the implementation of the mental health liaison position. As I mentioned previously, the grant will potentially offset the cost of implementing the mental health position, with the decision on that grant still pending. It should provide better outcomes to the clients as well as cost savings to the healthcare system. Both of these positions offer a high value to the community and would not be provided in an OPP-administered policing model. The dispatch contracts, we've completed a complete current review of the dispatch agreements and contracts. This review included a determination of true costs versus revenue and determined that some contracts needed updating to cover the actual costs. NG 911 is going to provide a significant opportunity for dispatching revenue in the future, and there are relatively few competitors offering dispatch services, and it's anticipated that that number will decline with NG 911 upgrades. So currently we're meeting those NG 911 upgrades and requirements, and we're going to be a test center for calls moving forward. As well, IT services and contracts will expand in 2020, and dispatch mapping will be another source of revenue. Third-party records checks have been an area of increased revenue as well, and we'll be continuing to try and use the income to try and offset the true costs of policing in the city of Owen Sound. The service review also included several special notes. The community programs offered by the service were estimated to be delivering an area of approximately $150,000 in benefit, and they set us apart from the basic service levels provided in most municipalities. These are the true links to the community that build relationships of trust and build a community policing model. They also indicated the bylaw, which would not be supported through an OPP presence, and estimated that savings that cost is $50,000 per year to replace. That position actually generates income, so it's nearly double that. And storefront hours were another thing that Mr. Levac identified. Is currently the public has access 24/7, 365. It's limited overnight, but for safety purposes, but it's still available. And and that's not something that would be offered in a comparable model, so he attributes a $75,000 benefit to the community for that. And the last thing, the service review identified a cost saving to the city of Owen Sound of $50,000 by pooling group benefit coverage. Not being overly experienced with exactly how that came about, we went and did some looking around to try and estimate how he came up with that. And the experience level was, on the behalf of the members, was how that was based. And to understand the calculation of the savings, we obtained an estimate from another provider, and they found that the resulting estimate was about $160,000 less than the current, based on current experience levels. So although we don't have an interest in moving forward and getting out of the pooled resources because it's a benefit to the city, we did want to talk about the attribution, how it's attributed to policing and how that generally comes through by department. So although it's difficult to provide an exact monetary value to all the changes, this is the best estimate. So we've implemented changes. We moved the part-time officers from the front desk, and he attributed $7,500 to that. The CSO to a civilian special constable, saving $45,000. We reassigned the CSO to the mental health officer position, which added $90,000, but it's going to be offset by an amount to be determined. Training issues, we don't know yet where that's going to leave us. IT expansions, we can't determine at that point right now. Removing the front desk constables and no addition of clerks saved us $20,000. Reducing the storefront hours, we can't actually implement that because it doesn't meet our CPIC obligation and the dispatch needs. Data entry, the iMobile terminals allow direct entry, and he said that that's about a $30,000 saving. I say that's probably a little bit high. I don't see it being that high. It's probably about $10,000. The property clerk, he says a $60,000 saving, but it was included with the ident clerk, and so it's probably about a $90,000 saving. And the mental health officer, none yet. It's anticipated it will save money in the future by deferring a number of calls for service. And by law, commercial activities and dedicated drugs and CIB investigators, he didn't provide a value, but I think they need to be considered as well. So in summary, and Mr. Levac's report said both services provide adequate and effective policing models. The costs obviously vary significantly. The OPP cost to provide the current OSPS service level is significantly more than the current costs and has increased significantly since the 2017 proposal. The current OPP year 4 onward costing is likely to remain similar to what it was projected in the 2017 costing, but it's difficult to estimate these costs as calls for service and crime severity index continue to rise significantly. Several municipalities are currently examining the options of moving to municipal policing options due to response times and service levels provided by the OPP. I think that's important to note. And some municipalities have requested OPP costing requests and have opted to remain with their municipal services, and some very small services have in fact switched to the OPP. The OSPS offers a cost-effective policing model for the service that's delivered. OPP would cost significantly more to offer that same level of service. OSPS generates approximately $1.3 million in revenue offset policing costs. There's a potential for a significant increase to assist and offset the cost of the taxpayer. And we continue to modernize and civilianize and to deliver a more cost-effective service. And some of the question between the two comes down to levels of service and what's expected of the Owen Sound Police Service and what's expected of the community, what the community needs and what the community expectations are. And obviously that's a decision that the Police Services Board has to make through input from Council. And that's my presentation.
Good, thank you. Questions from council? Councillor Tamming, go ahead.
I prepared a link for this. I'll try to...
Oh, get your mic on there so we can hear you. Yeah, thanks.
I thank you for your comments, Chief, and I appreciate everything you're doing to come up to speed on the job, which I don't think you've been at yet a year. Is that correct?
No, about 7 or 8 months.
So I really appreciate it. And in fairness to you, a lot of this may be historical in nature, and you're just coming to it for the fresh time. So a few questions. The City of Owen Sound asked the Police Services Board, I believe, to retain Mr. Levac to see if there were savings. Is that a fair statement?
That's my understanding.
Okay. His report came with about $560,000 worth of proposed savings. So just bottom line, you don't seem to, that was his 4-page executive report. He found $335,000 up front, and then he also said you could find another $225,000 in savings from operational. Mm-hmm. Does this sound familiar?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a total of $560,000 in savings. So I guess my question to you is, bottom line, Chief, of the $560,000 that Mr. Levesque identified, what can you find to save from the police budget, if any?
So,
Probably back a page
sorry. Yeah.
or two. There you go.
There you go. So that's the cost saving summary from Mr. Levac. I think it's important to point out I'm not necessarily going to agree with all of his cost savings. There were some significant expenses associated with those cost savings as well that he didn't include in his report.
What I'm seeing here, though, if I'm adding your numbers up, you just say there's too many unknowns, and really you don't know what it would cost to implement Levesque's recommendations. Is that a fair statement? I'm not trying to be critical, I'm just trying to understand.
I think it's important to note that some of them can't be implemented.
Right.
Because it would be illegal. And some of them, we don't plan on implementing at this time because it has to do with collective bargaining.
But if I add your numbers up on your PowerPoint, the 90 offsets itself.
Yep.
You get 10 plus 20. You get really about 60, 70,000 bucks on a good day, correct? That you could save us. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, 75, 80, some, yeah.
On a 9 million budget? Or 7? I don't know, depending on dispatch.
Yeah, $7 million budget. I think the important thing to note with that is the fact that Mr. Levac was able to find about $225,000 in savings on a $7 million budget, which to me indicates that it's a fairly tight budget and it's a fairly well-run organization.
But the most you're offering us tonight is a possibility of 80,000 in savings. I'm just trying to clarify what you're coming to us, because we did ask you to go back, find some cuts or savings.
I'm telling you that those 80,000 have already been implemented. There's other still savings to be had, but a lot of them can't be implemented this time yet.
Okay.
And we're always looking to make
And
savings.
perhaps you could. The second question I had, I originally came here with 2 formal motions. I'd rather not play the heavy, and I'm just going to ask this, sir. And I appreciate you're here as an employee of the Police Services Board, and all you can do is suggest and recommend to the board, and you take your orders from them. I understand that. But I'm wondering if you could suggest to the board that the board meets with somebody from Corporate Services to consider the Levac report, to consider your presentation, and to advise the city if, in fact, any of the Levac recommendations are doable. Would you at least suggest that Corporate Services meet with you instead of making this omelette in the next, 40 minutes? That's what I'm asking.
I can take anything back to the board.
I would ask you to do that. And also, I was going to make a motion for this, but again, I would just ask for a suggestion, and this relates to dispatch. For a few years before I was elected, I tried to understand if dispatch was a profit center for the city, and I'm no further ahead in understanding whether it makes a profit, and if so, what that profit is. And that's not to be critical of you, you're half a year into this job, Chief, but I'm wondering again, if you might suggest to the board that Corporate Services meet with the police board and produce a report which clearly sets out what the net profit or losses are from the dispatch center, and sets forth as well any future or existing personnel liabilities that we may incur as a result of running that center. Again, all I'm asking you to do is go to the board and suggest they meet with somebody, a CA from Corporate Services, so we can have a better handle on whether in fact dispatch makes money, and if so, whether it's negligible or meaningful money. I'm wondering if you would suggest that to the board.
I can take it back to the board. I can take any request back to the board. It's obviously their decision to make.
Would you make that request?
I can take whatever you like back.
Terrific, thanks. Now, I just have a few other comments, and then I'll defer to the other councillors, obviously. And I want to start with this. Many years ago, and on a personal note, because much of your report and Levac's report deals with the incredible mental health issues that your force faces day in, day out, and I just want to commend you for being sensitive to that. I remember about 15 years ago, a client of mine had deep suicidal thoughts. He was holed up at the Diamond Motel, and he was going to take his life. I called immediately across the street, and I know one of your officers met with the gentleman for at least half a day and talked him out of it, and at the end of the day, he opted not to go that way. He was a down-and-out Aboriginal citizen of this county, and what your service did then, I'll mention the officer, was Mike Comers. I commended him for it. And I was told either by him or the police chief, this is what we do all the time. So I'm not unaware of the level of service that you provide that the OPP might not provide. And I just want you to know that, Chief, okay?
Thank you.
The second point I want to make is, I'm not at all personally convinced that OPP was or should even be considered as a better route, okay? I know past council dealt with that. Any council can revise it if we want. I'm just collecting data right now. And I'm sincere in that, because if you Google Leamington and OPP, you'll find out that this month, Leamington is having a real hard look at the OPP, which it contracted with in 2010, whether it wants to continue dancing with them. They're not happy with the level of service that that town's being left with. Different factors, I get it. But there is a perception out there that the OPP may make promises that they don't keep and may not come through at the end of the day. That's not to fault OPP, it's just to say they're not necessarily the salvation. And so with that as background, I just invite you to, again, make that suggestion. I could go on, but I won't. And I thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Others? Councillor Burton, please go ahead.
Through your worship, this is the second time you've come before us with information. And again, we go back asking for more information. I can't help but wonder what the total paid man-hours has been devoted to this. And at what point do we say, it is time to move forward? I think you've heard from us that we need more detailed information, that we need comparators that compare apples to apples. Budget year is coming, but budget time is coming. Based on the two presentations, you've tried to make sense of the information, and it's clear to me that at a certain point we have to say, it's not jiving exactly. We need to make decisions based on information. We also need to dedicate the paid man-hours of the police to policing action. I think you understand our concern from a budgetary point of view, but we also need data and reports that help us make informed decisions. And that's our request. But coming back time and time again, I'm uncertain if that's value added, where the lesson to be learned is, give us the data, make it in an understandable format, so we can make the decisions to help move forward. Thank you.
Councillor Gregg, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Boy, and thanks, Chief, for being here tonight. Just a couple things. I wonder if I could even get you just to expand on, and you spoke briefly about it, UCR coding. And there's a difference between what was billed or utilized by the OPP and what we do. What are you, why is there a difference? And can you provide an example of that just to further my understanding on why we do what we do then?
Okay, so UCR coding is something that's mandated by Stats Canada, and so it's Uniform Crime Reporting. And so they ask that every call that the police attend is UCR coded so that there's an attributed weighting to it so they can calculate crime severity index and those things. The UCR coding used to be just a UCR code. This is the number, this is the type of occurrence it was. Now, and that's all that's mandated, is to have one. So an example of an incident would be a domestic assault. So now it could be, the primary UCR code would be an assault, and then the secondary UCR code could be a domestic. If it was a gang-style homicide, then it could be a homicide for the primary UCR code, but then it could also be gang-affiliated, and it could go on for a number of different types of secondary UCR codes. We UCR code the primary only. We only use it for UCR coding purposes so that it gets reported to Stats Canada. If other agencies choose to put in secondary codes and use it for alternative, use that data for other purposes, then it reflects other things in the primary and the secondary UCR codes.
Okay, thanks. So it's just expanding on the data they're collecting,
Yes.
really then. I guess a couple things, and you know, this is nothing more than, I guess, some comments that can go back to the board resulting from the information that you've provided here tonight. I'm glad to see some of these topics being discussed. I know one is it's wonderful that our station's open 24 hours a day, but is it affordable? It's noted it's a cost of $75,000 to keep it open through the evening hours. That's resultant from needs by CPIC and dispatch.
So it's not a cost of $75,000. He attributed a value to the community of $75,000 to that. I'm not sure where that came from. That's what he attributed a value to the community for having it open 24 hours a day. We have people in there working 24 hours a day, and they're doing other things, so it's not like they're just doing that. But I'm not sure how he attributed that weight to it.
Okay. So I just wondered well, my comment would have been if the cost was determined by dispatch, if that's a cost that we can allocate into our costing on dispatch proposals. But that's just me. In a perfect world, we're open 24/7. In a world where we're tight for money, and you have to operate maybe where you're closed for 7 hours. Well, I see it highlighted here, and it's been said to me that, there's a particular restaurant downtown in the middle of the night. At times, they seemingly get taxpayer-funded security. It seems that there's some discussion on looking at some prioritization in the hours and maybe some allocation of shift to when the call volume is heavier, which I was really glad to see, and really noting that maybe that same platoon depth, on a 4 rotation can be lessened here and maybe heightened here, because I think that's a fair comment when people say, well, in the middle of the night, we've got officers that are really just, a lot of services are being attributed to particular locations. And then I guess the most difficult discussion has to ultimately come back to council, and it's on the issue of mental health, and where we want to leave our taxpayer on the hook for following up. All the data is here. I've often said police work seems to be 95% of resources are allocated to the same 3% of the population. In fact, I think somewhere in here there was some discussion on 5 individuals and the amount of man hours. It was atrocious. So if we're going to work with police services, I think it's incumbent upon City Council at some time to delve into this deep discussion of why officers have to tie themselves up 3 or 4 deep in the middle of the afternoon with people often downtown. I'm downtown all the time, so I see it, and I see the amount of manpower that has to be attributed to it. So if we don't want to have that difficult discussion, then that's fair, but we recognize there is a large cost to doing that. And thanks for your efforts, Chief, and the mental health officer and the restructuring here to try to offset some of that load, but it's significant in the community. I know also, thanks, I mean, I support looking at the CSO role. Constable Hay, way back when, saw far more individuals and students in schools across the city. It was just a function of the population, and now we don't have those kids. We've closed half the schools, so it leaves one wondering, well, what's that individual doing with their time? And obviously the schools aren't what they were. So I'm glad to see that the force is responding to changes in today's demographics. So
I don't think there's any way we can continue to do business the way we have been, especially when it comes to mental health, because you see in the numbers that they're increasing by almost 50% as of June of this year, and the time allotted per call is also increased by 10 minutes, and so I mean that's why we've taken a tough look and say how can we change our response to this, and hopefully, and it's worked in other communities where 75% of the people were being apprehended and taken to the hospital, which isn't out of line with the numbers that we're doing right now, and because we're not the best service to be dealing with those people. So we're taking them to the hospital. At the same time, only 22% of those people are being admitted in the hospital, so you're driving some of them home with you when you leave. That's not good for the client. That's not good for anybody. It increases the hospital costs as well. So the goal is that we will try and flip that number around so that we only take 25% of the hospital, and at least 75% of those people are admitted into the hospital because they're the ones that need to be there when they need it. So,
Councillor Thomas.
Okay, thanks, Chief. I think you've answered every question I ever may have had about the Levac report. I'm ready to stop talking about the Levac report. I don't ever want to hear about it again. I think that, you know, right at the end of your report, you hit the nail on the head when you said the true question comes down to levels of service and what's expected at the Owen Sound Police and what level of service is desired by the community. This decision needs to be made by the Police Services Board through input from City Council. I'd like you to tell me how you see us moving forward here then to achieve some of the goals, recognizing that we as a council need to realize some savings here. We need to. We know there's big cuts coming next year municipally from the Ford government. It's just going to get worse. So how are we going to work together to move this forward without beating this same horse to death every 6 months?
I appreciate that, and I have to say, this report was done and was timely 6 months before I arrived, so it's been a bit of a learning curve for me as well, because a lot of things had changed by the time I took on this role. So, yeah, that would be a good thing to put it to bed. As far as moving forward, I think it's important, and the Police Services Act allows for, you have representation of members of council on the Police Services Board. There's a community representative on the Police Services Board, as well as 2 provincial appointees. I think it's important to go back, and when we're setting the budget, to look at it and you know, come back. And I will tell you, I did my best this year. There was a 3.7% placeholder in place when I arrived January 21st, and we got that down to 2.25%. So I commit myself to the council to say that we'll do what we can to keep that as low as possible in the first place, without going, you know, where we're going to be in a position where we're going to be over budget, because I don't want to have to come back here and explain that to you as well. And we have been under budget the last couple of years, and so it's a matter of if there's a service level and if there's some change that you want implemented, I think it's important that the members of the council that are on the Police Services Board bring that forward to the Police Services Board and have that discussion as to what is the expectation, what is the service delivery, what's the expectations for the community, and that's the method for doing that.
Go ahead.
I guess part of what got this whole thing going in the first place, certainly when I came onto council in 2014 and we went through our first budget process, you know, the comment that was made regarding police services is, if you want to cut the budget, but really you have no input on how the money is spent. I'm paraphrasing there, but that was the impression that I got. And that was very difficult for me to understand as an elected official. I understand the Police Services Act is there for a reason. It's got an important role to play. But sometimes it makes it very difficult for us to speak to one another in a meaningful way to try to deal with some of these issues. So, you know, moving forward, I guess from my perspective as a councillor, I'd like to see us find a way to get beyond that so that we can find some meaningful savings. You know, 27% of our municipal budget, and it's a lot of money. But it's a great service on the other hand. I don't feel comfortable stepping up and saying, okay, reduce your budget by $500,000 next year. I don't care how you do it. And I think that's why we're sitting here around this table having these discussions, is because I don't feel comfortable just saying that, even though I'd love to do it. Because really, you know, what a difference it would make to the tax rate that our taxpayers, we hear so much about here around the council table. So moving forward, I mean, it would be nice if we could find some way to just open it up a little bit more. I know we have members on the Police Services Board, but somehow there needs to be more involvement from the council perspective. There needs to be a better understanding from our perspective. If we're saying, okay, let's cut that community services position. Okay, what does that mean? Like, I need to have a clear understanding of what that means long-term before I could say it. But I mean, it's easy pickings. There's $150,000. So, but again, it's a cut I'm reluctant to make without having a full understanding of what it means. So I guess moving forward, I'd like to see us in some way open up the lines of communication even more than they are, so that we understand what's going on. So,
in respect to your comment, your original comment there, I spoke to some of my colleagues recently when we gathered, and to be honest with you, some of them still feel that way. That you know, why would you be going to council and why would you be presenting this information? I'm of a different thought. I came here and I tried to explain exactly where we are, what direction we're going with, and how we're going to achieve that. And hopefully that's a benefit to you as a council, and it's a benefit to us as a police service. And to try and work together better moving forward. So.
Well, it definitely is from my perspective, and I thank you for that effort.
Thank you. Others? Deputy Mayor O'Leary, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Chief. Well, I'm going to keep banging away at the horse because I don't think it's dead quite yet. I've got some things I want to talk about yet. I'd like to just be able to simplify this because we know an OPP officer makes more money than our officers, correct? So it's close.
It would be comparable. I'm not sure if it's more.
I thought it was $1,000 more or something, but we're certainly not overpaying our police officers. I think Brent Down would agree with me there. But, so it's certainly not that. But I'll just read what I have here and I'll let you respond. In general, OPP provided policing is less expensive than local police forces by an average of about $80 per capita. If we had the same cost per capita as Orillia, we would save $1.7 million. That's staggering. If we had the same per capita as Collingwood, we would save $2.5 million. That's an overall budgetary savings to the ratepayer of 6 to 8%. That's staggering. We've done the service review. That's got us nowhere. To me, there's still $1 million somewhere. I think there's got to be some kind of a mistake. I'm gonna stick with that until somebody tells me absolutely not the case. I look at Councillor Tamming mentioned Leamington. They're with OPP. They have a population of 28,000. They pay $191 per capita. We pay $341. I'm not sure how that happens. They're a population of 28,000, and their police budget is $5,352,000. Ours is over $7 million. It just doesn't make sense to me. Collingwood has a population of 23,815. They're paying $208 per capita compared to our $340. They have a higher population than us, and their budget is under $5 million. They're OPP. Strathroy has a city police force. Their population is 21,656. Their per capita is 294 compared to ours at 340. They have a city police force. Same population as us, and they have 10 less police officers. I don't understand that. Can you respond to that?
Well, and the OPP one certainly comes down to service levels and what you're looking at, and some of it is that some of those areas have rural areas as well, Collingwood, so the cost for the rural policing is different. OPP, Owen Sound is very different because it's all municipal. There's no other portion to it, and yeah, certainly I hadn't compared Strathroy that you mentioned, but certainly a lot of the other comparable services. Stratford would be the exact same cost per capita as we are. Woodstock is significantly more. St. Thomas is somewhat less. So I mean, yeah, they vary. They go a lot of different up and down.
But we're talking a lot of money. Like, there's a big difference, and that's what makes me think, like, there's got to be something wrong. Like, we're $340 per household. I mean, we're talking really big money, and I just think there's got to be something there. And I know when I mention $1 million, I know the board chair will say it's not $1 million. Well, it is $1 million. Look at the budgets I just gave you. Like, these other places have $5 million budgets. Ours is over 7. Like, there's something not right. So if the OPP are doing something different, let's do what the OPP are doing. Like, this council we've done our part. We still have city police. That's what I want. But we can't do it for $1 million. Can't. It's too much money. Those are my comments. Thanks.
And anyone else? Seeing none. I'm going to go easy on you. The only thing I can take a poke at is that you referred to the severe crime index, and we had a discussion with some of the press about that. Our numbers went up, and of course the press are all over that because Owen Sound's much more violent. Out of the top 20 of that crime index across Canada, 12 of them, 60%, were less than 30,000. 50% of them were less than 20. They didn't measure under 10s. That's 10 to 20,000. In that 20, Regina is at 200,000. I think Red Deer is at 100,000. When I looked at the top 100, it was 45% were under 30,000. So somehow those numbers are being skewed against a small community like ours. Like somehow they just don't add up. Some of us have been in a different community very recently that there was 3 stabbings in one night within a block of where we were. And it's an extremely violent town that doesn't show up in the top 20. And so I just take that severe crime index with a grain of salt, that's all. Anyway, that's got nothing to do with you, but I had to rant at you about something.
That's fine, no, and I will agree with you, the fact that the crime severity index, with a smaller base population, one significant event, if you have a homicide, your crime severity index will go through the roof. Coming from a previous service, person-on-person robbery, if you were having 3 a week, 4 a week, you knew your crime severity index was going to go through the roof at the end of the week. If you have one a month here, it's going to go up significantly more than that. So it's weighted, but it's not necessarily equal by population.
Good. Thank you. So I'm seeing no one else. Do we have to move to receive the report tonight? Probably. So we'll do that. Marion's put up, Councillor Kepke's put up her hand to move receipt of the report and put it on the record. All in favor? That is carried. We want to thank you, Chief Ambrose, and everyone coming in and meeting with us tonight, explaining some of the things. I think it helped us understand or answer some of the questions we had a couple of months ago when you're here, and helped fill in some of those things. We look forward to moving forward. Budget season will be coming in. Already started. In the next couple of weeks will be coming at us quick, looking at 2020. So thank you again.
Thank you.
If I may move on to the next deputation is Mr. Kafalis with regard to the Downtown River Precinct project update.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through Your Worship. The 8th Street work has been completed and was completed on time in terms of the proposed schedule. We were very lucky in terms of dodging a bullet of what may have been required after we actually dug up the bridge to see what was there and what was supposed to be there. Working with the contractor and our design engineer, we were able to come up with a solution that allowed us to complete the work on schedule and have the road open as anticipated late Friday afternoon. All the flat concrete work has been completed except for a small portion or minor work that needs to be done around the sitting pebbles near 9th Street. Not all the paving stones, but the paving stones have been installed from 9th Street to the north end of the pavilion, as well as in the Percy England parquet. The pavilion has been framed and is ready for roofing and cladding. Right now the base course of asphalt has been placed within on First Avenue East, as well as within City Hall parking lot. Shade sails have been installed. We have issued a 2-week extension, which makes the date of substantial completion Friday, September 13th, 2019. The reason we had to do that, we're having issues dealing with a certain type of paving stone that'll be used within the courtyard and along the boulevard on the east side of First Avenue East. The subcontractor actually ordered the wrong material or the wrong brick, or the brick with the wrong finish. We had a choice of either accepting a standard finish or accepting what we had used or what we anticipated being part of the original construction. And given that this project will last for many years, we wanted to maintain the original design and create more of a very warm setting, so the finish on those bricks would allow us to do that. What we're trying to do is create a courtyard adjacent to the pavilion that can be used as a parking lot, as opposed to a parking lot that'll be used as a courtyard. So the decision was made to grant them extension, and told them to get this brick in town as quickly as possible. It's no fault of city administration or the engineer. It was a mistake by the subcontractor who's doing the paving stones. So with that being said, we're still on budget, but we anticipate we will have a bit of a delay in terms of determination of this, or completion of this project.
Thank you. Questions on that report? No. If there's anything we learned at City Hall, that of three variables, price, quality, and time we don't care that much about, within reason, but price matters, and staying on budget and getting the quality that we wanted is everything. So I think you're next with regard to 10th Street Bridge.
Actually, Nellie's volunteered to do that one.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Thomas maybe has a question.
I'm
before
sorry,
we-
I just do have one quick question about the repaving of 8th Street. Now the new lines have been painted for the new traffic routing, and there's still a lot of people parking over there today, even though the heads are off the meters. And I just wondered what the status is of the no parking on 8th Street, so that people have a clearer understanding of whether they should or shouldn't be.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Thomas. Yes, that's the whole idea is when we finished the paving on Friday, we had a choice of either installing some temporary line markings that were existing from the past, or install the new ones. And we didn't want to have new asphalt and then have to sandblast it within 3 weeks and put the new lines down. So we chose to do this. Today, we did put the barrels or tubs out to designate the parking lane and allow people to, I'm not saying figure things out, but anticipate what was expected or has been expected and what will be expected. We are issuing a media release sometime tomorrow, just telling people that we are moving ahead with certain aspects of the detour and other minor work that needs to be completed as part of prepping for that bridge. So tomorrow, today we instructed the contractor to remove the meter heads. He has some staff available. We'll eventually start putting no parking signs up in those locations, or I guess the next contractor, Luby's, will start doing that. It's just trying to get as much done when we can, try and be efficient with our time, knowing that the closure, which I'll speak to on my next report, is coming. But yeah, we're trying to be efficient and not waste time or effort going back and forth.
And with that, Deputy Mayor O'Leary has a question.
Thank you, Your Worship. Dennis, when you opened First Avenue, which is when? East?
First Avenue East.
Yeah, when you opened that,
yes.
which is when?
I'm hoping that it'll be approximately September 13th, 2019.
So just before the bridge closes?
Correct.
And when the bridge closes, you've got, I just wondering what their options are when the cars start racing down First Avenue East to beat all this traffic with the bridge out, what their options are going to be when they get to 8th Street with 2 lanes of traffic heading east.
Their options will be they can turn right or turn left.
Wait on the gap?
That's all you're going to be able to expect to do. We're not, 8th Street will become a major segment of our detour. So I think people will learn pretty quickly if they think they're taking a shortcut during rush hour.
Right.
Good luck, because if I'm driving down 8th Street and I see someone do that, I'm not letting them in.
Okay, thanks. Shouldn't be like that.
So any other questions on River Precinct? Seeing none. Now, Nellie. 10th Street Bridge, go ahead.
I'm sorry. 10th Street Bridge, thank you, through your worship. Luby Construction Limited was awarded the contract. We've had a pre-construction meeting, which was held on August 15th, where we discussed a lot of the administrative aspects leading up to the project, who's reporting to whom, who's involved, who is taking the lead from the various partners associated with this project, looking at the schedule, and that sort of thing, when they can expect that when they want to actually take ownership of the 10th Street Bridge and the portions of 10th Street. We've had a subsequent meeting last week where we discussed the prep work involving the water mains that needs to be completed before the bridge can be taken out, and the implementation of the detour. You'll definitely start noticing the contractor around town just after Labor Day as they start preliminary work on the detour route. Their plan is to first lay out the or actually not lay out yet, or stake or lay out the locations of the construction sites as you approach the city. So what they're going to do is actually stake them out, and then they'll consult with both MTO and the county to make sure that the signs are in the appropriate locations, and they'll be showing them the designs that'll be included on the, or the designs of the signs to ensure they meet the standards and they meet the satisfaction of both jurisdictions. After the installation of the signs, they'll start working on the actual lane designation signs downtown that you'll see along 8th, 9th, 3rd, and 2nd. And those are those black and white signs that show you which lane you're supposed to be in when you expect to make a left-hand turn, drive straight through, that sort of thing. So they'll end up putting those signs up leading up to the date when they expect to close 10th Street, which, based on last week's meeting, is September 25th. Again, that's tentative. We'll have another meeting September 4th to make sure that that's still the date they're looking at. Just after they install those signs, they'll start looking at doing the line painting on the detour route, and we expect that to happen within a week of the, possibly 2 weeks of when they plan to close the road. Again, we would like to see the lines painted and allow people to become familiar with the lanes and the detour route so that it's just not sprung on them at the 11th hour. During that time, they'll be also working on the timings of the traffic lights. We've provided them with the timings and for the traffic lights, and they'll be required to install that and implement it and maintain it during the duration of the project. Staff has also been busy working on the communication plan, including branding and developing a web page. The web page will include background information, including reports, frequently asked questions, photos, and videos of the project. The plan is to do approximately 8 videos, similar to what we did with Downtown River Precinct. We haven't come up with a name. We're happy with the consultant's work when it comes to those videos, so we're looking to implement that as well. We've had some very good feedback regarding Downtown River Precinct and how people have been following the videos to see what the status is of that project, and we feel that this will be a great communication tool for the bridge as well. We've developed a list of stakeholders that we'll be communicating directly with, including but not limited to trucking companies, the grain elevator, businesses within the affected area, the farmers market, Life Labs, local B&Bs, transit companies, the media, Chamber of Commerce, Grey County Tourism, Bruce County Tourism, the DIA membership and their board, and special event organizers. And by that I mean people who do hold parades, whether it's Kiwanis, for the Santa Claus Parade or Pride for their parade, that sort of thing. These are people that we'll be communicating with to work out the details. And I think the big one, the first one will be Remembrance Day and what we'll do with that parade. So we have to devise a route and see how this will work. So we'll be working with the organizers of that event as well. Staff have been working on advertising and radio and newspapers, including development of a Speedia or a wrap that will actually concentrate on the detour, but also include other information pertinent to the bridge. We've developed a newsletter that I've circulated around on your desk that we've actually circulated 200 businesses and residents within the affected area. During that time, we've also met with approximately 100 people. Last week, we actually made a presentation to Kiwanis to speak about several major projects that we're undertaking, including the bridge, so there's a lot of questions there. We're scheduled to appear on Grey County Live-In on September 11th, and we're working with, we're also making an appearance on Open Line, which we should be doing fairly shortly. Not that I'm putting anyone on the spot. We'll be doing a periodic basic council via deputations at council meetings, and we'll also, as I indicated, doing the videos to help promote this project and get the message out there on what's happening.
Questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just so I'm clear, you're going to have the detours beginning like a week before the bridge closes?
That's the idea, is to have everything in place so people become familiar with the detour and the routes and the lane designations.
So will this all happen overnight? Like you're going to paint all these lines and then bang one morning, you're going to have 2 lanes going, 1 lane going the other way?
We've discussed this with the contractor. I mean, if it can be done in one night, but I think they're anticipating probably over maybe several nights or 2 nights, just because they'll concentrate on the different areas, east-west, and that sort of thing. And again, the signs will be up, the lane designation signs will be up, they'll be bagged. And then when there's lines, everything's ready to go, they'll unveil everything and they'll be in place.
Okay, just a suggestion, when you're on open line, you might want to promote the accident reporting center, because I'm worried about the old sound drivers with these 2 lanes turning left side by side.
I am very confident that the drivers in Owen Sound will be able to use the DCR.
John, go ahead.
Dennis, thanks very much. A citizen asked me if the contract for the bridge contains any penalties for late delivery. Can you speak to that?
There's always liquidated damage associated with our contracts, but you'll find, my experience shows that if you're a jurisdiction that actually hits someone with a hammer every time on these things, the contractors quickly learn that and they build it into their contract value. The smart ones do.
Anyone else? Good. Nellie, thank you very much for that report. Well done. You're very informed. That's great. Thanks, Dennis. Number 10 on the agenda, public question period. If anyone here has a from the public has a question. Not seeing anyone move too quickly. No. Okay. Correspondence received for which direction of council is required. We have none. Reports from city staff down to 12A. I think Ms. Coulter with regard to 1200 16th Avenue East.
Thank you, Worship. This is the final recommendation report respecting an application for zoning bylaw amendment as well as site plan approval by Legacy Hospitality Management and Development. The lands are located between 10th Street East and 16th Street East on the west side of 16th Avenue East. We have transposed east and west in the surrounding land use on page 2 of your report. The 2-acre subject property is currently vacant, and there are a variety of land uses surrounding the property. Immediately north is a vacant piece of property, future long-term care area, as well as the Vandoler Plaza. To the west is the Anpet residential subdivision. East is Seasons and Canadian Tire, and then to the south is the Sun Life development. The property has access to full municipal services. The lands are designated East City Commercial and zoned C2 with a holding provision. The applicant has submitted a significant amount of information and studies to support the application. Some of this has been updated following the public meeting, and that's summarized in page 5 of your report. The report also summarizes the process that we've worked through with this developer in getting to the recommendation report this evening. In terms of the provincial policy statement, development within a fully serviced urban area on full municipal services contiguous to other development is supported by the provincial policy statement for the development of strong communities. In terms of the city's official plan, the property, as I mentioned, is designated East City Commercial within Phase 1. The designation contemplates retail and hotel-type uses, and the OP does speak to ensuring that a development has sufficient parking as well as compatibility, and I'll talk more about that in the zoning section. But our conclusion is that the proposal does conform with the policies of our official plan. In terms of the zoning amendment, the first part is the removal of a holding provision, and that really relates to servicing infrastructure that the city installed many years ago along 16th Avenue, so it's nice to be recovering some of those costs. So the bylaw to remove the H will come forward to council when that $43,000 has been paid by the developer. To summarize the other exceptions that the developer had requested, one was the patio setback, both from long-term care and a residential zone, from 50 meters to 43 meters and 35 meters respectively. They had asked for a reduction in parking spaces. Originally, they were short 37 spaces. The revised proposal before council this evening is short 15 spaces, so 146 are required and 131 are provided. A small reduction in loading spaces, one for the hotel, reduction in the front yard setback from 10 to 7.7 meters, and an increase in the maximum height to the top of the parapet wall to 23.3 meters. In terms of the outdoor parking area, the outdoor patio It is associated with a breakfast patio, so certainly a different type of impact than a patio associated with a drinking establishment. The bulk of the hotel building, as well as the landscaping elements such as fencing and planting, will certainly augment the physical distance, which is still over 35 meters to the residential area, and staff can support that reduction and recommend that as part of the zoning. In terms of the reduction of parking, as I mentioned, the original proposal was short 37, and now before council is 15 space reduction. The revised proposal removed the second floor from the retail building, so there was offices proposed for the second floor, so that's been reduced or removed completely. And we've also recommended in the zoning that the basement area has to be storage associated with the main floor retail. In addition, the parking demand study that was provided in support of the application shows that the peak demand is around 7 p.m., where they estimate 103 spaces would be required. The site will provide 131, so there should be sufficient margin of error there. In addition, staff are recommending that uses such as restaurants, veterinary clinics, medical clinics, and funeral homes, which would have a higher parking requirement, although would be permitted generally in a C2 zone, would not be permitted on this site, and staff did present that to the developer. In terms of the reduced loading spaces, one space for the hotel is considered sufficient for the development and use of the site. The reduced front yard setback will be very similar to the Sun Life building located to the south, and it will help create a strong street edge along 16th Avenue and make it more pedestrian. In terms of the increased height, the height to the flat roof is 18.5 meters, where 18 is permitted. It's this parapet wall, which will provide some visual relief in terms of the infrastructure that will be located on the roof, as well as some sound attenuation. The shadowing study does demonstrate that there would be a minimal impact of that increase in height on the adjacent properties, and staff certainly support that. The proposal was reviewed by our Accessibility Advisory Committee, and the recommendations from the committee have been included in the revised presentation to council. In terms of site plan matters, the overall site layout, parking, including the location of the accessible spaces and the design of those spaces, pedestrian connectivity from 16th Avenue within the site, the landscaping, lighting, stormwater management, and servicing are all appropriate for the development and use of this site. Staff are recommending approval of the site plan, 2-year time frame for the completion of the works, and a $30,000 security. So with that, Your Worship, the recommendation is that in consideration of the staff report and in consideration of the written and oral submissions made at the public meeting, that you would find that the applications are consistent with the provincial policy statement, as well as the goals and objectives of the city's official plan, and that you would approve a zoning amendment based on the draft provisions outlined in section D1 of the staff report, and that you would ask staff to bring forward a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enact a bylaw to adopt a zoning bylaw amendment 28, and that you would also ask staff to bring forward a bylaw to remove the holding provision once the capital recovery cost has been paid, and that in consideration of the site plan, you would approve that site plan subject to the conditions in Appendix F, and I would note there are only 2 conditions, and that you would authorize a bylaw to allow the mayor and clerk to execute that site plan agreement.
Good, thank you. Councillor Hamley.
Yep, I'd move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Any discussion, any questions? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Pam, have you got the next one too?
I do. So as Mr. Kafalis had indicated, the Downtown River Precinct is going to be completed on September 13, and through your 2019 budget, Council had approved a new event for the downtown, specifically this River Precinct area. So this report really provides you with a bit of a summary of the event, the date and location, budget and sponsorship, marketing, promotion, as well as asks you to designate the event as municipally significant in terms of the special occasion permit for the event. So the event is planned for Saturday, September 28th. It will start around 4 in the afternoon, and very similar to Harborfest, it will be a free, family-oriented event centered again on the water, this time the Sydenham River in the downtown River Precinct, as well as the farmers market. The site plan is attached to the report, and the clerk has it on the screen for you, but it really will be a trial for us in terms of how we use this new space. So the stage will be right at the end of the south end of the new First Avenue East, with the licensed area in the City Hall parking area. There'll be local entertainment that will start at 4 p.m. and then at 9 p.m. Chicken Fried, which is a Zach Band tribute band, will take the stage. We've been working with the farmers market manager on the farmers market and the vendors there, providing kids and family activities and games. We've put out a call for community partners, and we've been really pleased with our response, and we used media and social media and traditional media to do that, as well as included the DIA. We'd like to incorporate the salmon tour into this event. The location on Sydenham River really works. Our partner in that tour, Grey Sawbill Conservation, we're just looking for them to confirm that they'll be back. In terms of budget and sponsorship, there is a detailed budget attached to your report, and we have Barry's Construction and Graber's Property Rentals as the major event sponsor. In terms of municipal significance, the city will use our joint alcohol license to provide alcohol service for the event. We'd like to treat ourselves like we would any promoter. We've prepared an operational plan for the event, meeting with Owen Sound Police Services and AGCO to ensure that the event will happen safely. In terms of municipal significance, the event meets the criteria to designate the event as municipally significant in order that we can obtain our special occasion permit from the AGCO. So the recommendation is that council would receive the report, you would approve the operation of a licensed area on city property from 4 till 11 p.m., subject to the conditions outlined in the report, Schedule A, and that you would deem the event as municipally significant.
Thank you. Councillor Kepke?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think this is really great and good planning on the city's part, and nice opening to this area. So we're all looking forward to it. And with that, I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, I just have one. When we had that map up there, where the licensed area is, it showed a 4-foot fence. Does that mean that we're putting fence poles, driving fence poles into a new parking lot?
Through your worship, it will be construction fence with sort of an L-shaped footing, and there won't be any stakes going into the new parking area.
Good. I just remember we used to put up tents
Right.
there for Celtic Fest, maybe, that would, in One World Festival, that would have left marks. That, okay, no one else has questions. Call it all in favor. That is carried. Thank you. 12C.
Thank you. Thank you, Worship. This is a technical report respecting a zoning bylaw amendment with respect to food and beverage as well as cannabis production facilities. You heard a little bit about this at your last meeting through the minutes of Community Services Committee, where that committee had recommended we move forward with a public meeting for this city-initiated zoning bylaw amendment. The proposal really has two parts. The first is food and beverage production. Currently, food processing is a prohibited use in all zones within the city, and understanding agricultural production and where we are in Grey and Bruce counties, certainly food and beverage production is of interest and would be value added for the local economy. In terms of the recreational cannabis, right now our zoning bylaw permits only medical marijuana growing operations, and with the changes in federal legislation, we'd like to update our zoning bylaw to be in line with that. So it would just deal with cannabis production, still requiring federal and provincial licenses. So in terms of the process, we had the July meeting of Community Services. That resolution directed that we give public notice. We have this technical report. The technical report really does provide you with the policy framework in which council would evaluate and consider those proposed amendments, the PPS, the county official plan, the city's official plan, as well as a draft of the amendment. At the upcoming public meeting on September 9th, staff would do a more detailed presentation of the draft amendment. So with that, Your Worship, the recommendation is that you would receive the report for information and acknowledge that the clerk has given notice of the public meeting as per the direction approved by council, and that following the public meeting, staff would bring forward a recommendation report to council for consideration.
Great, thank you. Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that recommendation. And Pam, I wonder if you just give us a quick update on our own medical marijuana plant. Where are we at with it?
Thank you, Worship. There is a medical marijuana plant proposed for the former PPG building. Those building permit plans were submitted to the city with the application, and I think the permit has been issued, so that renovation for that operation is underway.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is, I'm sure, Pam, you're probably getting a little bit tired. Dennis, do you want to give a couple reports here just to take the pressure off of Pam? Go ahead. 12D.
Through your worship, staff is seeking council's approval for the award of the water treatment valve traveling screen and pipe replacement project to, am I on the wrong one?
Yeah, go ahead if you want, and we'll go back to the other one.
Oh, sorry, no, I'll do this one, yeah.
Okay.
I guess I got them in the wrong order. Thank you, your worship. Through you, your worship, this is essentially just going through our process of developing the necessary paperwork to formalize the agreement between MTO and the city for the Connecting Link funding agreement for the rehabilitation of Highway 26, 16th Street rehabilitation. Essentially, it's mostly housekeeping, so there's not much to say other than we plan on tendering this project later this year with construction actually take place summer 2020.
Good, thank you. So there's a recommendation there. Councillor Gregg?
Thanks, Mayor By. There's not much to add to this. It's very good news, so it's a pleasure that the city's been able to benefit from this grant from the province, so glad they move it.
Thank you. All in favor? That is carried. Good, thanks. Dennis, do you want to do another one, or do you want Nellie to do the next one?
I'd like her to do this one.
Okay.
Staff is seeking council approval for the award of the water treatment plant valve traveling screen and pipe replacement project to B&L? Yes. Sorry. Yeah, BGL Contractors Corporation. The total contract value is $784,785. Council will also have to approve allocating $93,723 from the water reserve to fund the approved budget project to make up for the shortfall of the budget and the difference from what the tender submission. This work includes 3 capital projects. They were assembled in order to be more effective and efficient in terms of getting the work out, as well as the work getting completed, as opposed to having 3 separate projects to administer. We have one. This work really was based on the capital asset assessment of the water treatment plant and identified a list of projects that needed to be completed. The structure itself is in excellent shape and can meet the needs of residents of Owen Sound for quite some time. However, the internal workings and piping and other components does need to be replaced on a periodic basis, I should say. And we anticipate that this work will take quite some time. We want to start as soon as possible and anticipate probably 6 to 9 months worth of work. Essentially, work that was identified as part of the capital asset management or assessment actually started, when the work initially associated with the capital asset assessment started taking place in 2017. This project probably should have, there is a bit of a carryover for a couple of these components that we hoped that we could start last year, but there was a lot of details in the design that would needed to be completed, and that took longer than expected, and that's why we assembled or included all the projects into one major contract.
Good, thank you. Well, Councillor Merton, have you got your hand up? Stiffed. Who wants to move that? Councillor Thomas.
I'll move the recommendation.
Thanks. Any other questions? Dennis, can you describe, give us a visual of where these are in the building? Are they like the long hallway coming from the bottom up, or are they the yellow room with the big blue valves?
Do you remember when you went for your tour, you went all the way down the stairs, and then you walked along that long corridor?
Yeah.
There's the piping and valves there. And then you remember when you got right to the end of that, and you walked into this other room, and there was this old kind of rectangular, round top looking thing that's a traveling screen. It's been in place since 1967 in our centennial years, so we've gotten 50 years out of it. It's done its
it's a little
duty.
pump house down at the very close to the water then?
Kind of, yeah. It's just before that where you see the traveling screen.
Good, okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, called, all in favor? That is carried. So we're down to number 13, which is consent agenda.
Through you, Your Worship, on the consent agenda this evening is minutes for receipt from the DIA Board, and business licenses were issued to Summerfolk, Tibbs Management at 283 10th Street East, Matt's Car Audio and Electronics at 231 8th Street East, Naked Basics relocated to 1035 2nd Ave East, and Hit the Beat School of Performing Arts relocated to 1050 2nd Ave East, Unit 4. Lastly, there is correspondence presented for the information of council. A full listing is available at 13C.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Larry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself that City Council receives items 13A to 13C on the consent agenda dated August 26, 2019.
All in favor? That is carried. I see there's minutes from DIA.
Thank you, Your Worship.
You're doing that one.
Wayne Ritchie provided, City Manager Wayne Ritchie provided a summary regarding financial results of the parking system from January 1st to March 31st. He also explained the prorated cost for the DIA as the DIA/city-sponsored parking didn't start until April 1st. Director of Community Services Pam Colder presented the Downtown Action and Marketing Plan. The DIA Board requested that staff prepare a draft RFP for consideration and requested that City Council consider partnering on this initiative, which we already did 2 weeks ago. There was final approvals issued for the following business licenses in downtown improvement area: E&H Property Management at 224 8th Street East, Carrie Bertrand Paralegal Services located at 945 3rd Avenue East, Suite 945, and John's Barbershop relocated to 1041 2nd Avenue East. Thank you, Worship.
Is there any questions? Seeing none. I already called the vote on that, did I? Yes. So number 14 on the agenda is minutes from Operations Committee.
Thanks, Mayor Bai. The meeting itself was a fairly quick meeting, fairly late in August agenda, but we had 2 letters received again at committee. One regarding speeding along Gray Road 15, so north of the wastewater treatment plant. And this road's been upgraded, as we're all aware, about 4 years ago. And actually, it's one of these things where you'd have an old road and people slow down because of the wear and tear that's causing their vehicles. And then you rehabilitate a road, and then you hit problems where people are driving too fast. So this is a county road. The city does have control over it, and we have a report coming back in the future from staff when they're able to bring that forward. We'll remember that I think this is the 3rd one over the summer. We had one on the West Hill and also one near Alpha Street. So we get these reports, and we anticipate having more information come back regarding that location and the speeding along it. We also had a letter from a resident regarding accidents occurring at 14th Street and 3rd Avenue East. This is also a gray Road 15, but most people recognize it as 3rd Avenue East, and it's located right south of St. Mary's Hill. So a lot of traffic routine is to go down St. Mary's Hill, turn left, immediately turn right. City staff alongside county engineering staff have been up there, and the county is responding to some of the issues at that location, and they'll have a subsequent bylaw amendment that they'll have to move at the county just to formalize some changes that need to occur there as well. So we'll have information come back in the future regarding that location and what we've done to improve and lessen those recurring accidents, which actually have been fairly substantial at that corner due to likely sight lines being lost by traffic that's cutting through to the hill. We had the monthly airport received, report, received, no questions to that. We had a report on the cigarette butt recycling pilot project. This has been in the news quite a bit in the last couple of weeks, so you're all likely familiar with it already. But we have an initiative to install about 12 or about a dozen units downtown, and these are cigarette butt collection devices. City staff will use safe operating procedures, so SOPs in place when they're emptying these to make sure that everything's safe. The product itself is sent to TerraCycle, where it's recycled by that company. This is approximately a 3-month trial, so we're hopeful that we have positive results in cleaning up our downtown, and just an ongoing endless amount of cigarette butts that just get discarded and don't go into the garbage, and not necessarily do you want them going into the garbage when they're still potentially lit. It's something that, well, I guess you go back to the 70s, 80s, all cars had a cigarette or an ashtray in the car. They don't anymore, and it's not odd just to be driving down a highway at night and seeing the butt go flying out a car window. So it's a problem that is everywhere, and it's quite considerable in downtown. So its approximate cost are about $3,000, and that will be absorbed into the operations, into the existing budget or a little beyond. And hopefully actually a byproduct of this will be a little less time spent needing to clean the streets. So hopefully this is a positive initiative. We'll have a report come back in the future. And we also had a draft backflow bylaw come for comment and any further information. There wasn't anything further from committee to add to the draft backflow prevention bylaw. This is the program we're familiar with. It's a $2 million endeavor to install backflow devices in institutional, commercial, and I guess multi-residential is the third locations in our city. Council's approved this as a $200,000 annualized investment in terms of moving forward, but we need a bylaw to properly speak to the actions and penalties that would be in place for non-enforcement. So if there's any questions, you can direct them to Dennis regarding the backflow. And with that, I'd move receipt of the minutes.
Good, thank you. Councillor Kepke had her hand up.
I just wanted to note that when we visited the AMO conference recently in Ottawa, Owen Sound is extremely clean when you look at cigarette butts. It was awful there.
Go ahead.
Through your worship, going back to the butts, it's been suggested to me that we could use this as an opportunity for marketing and promotion to allow people to purchase, to support, to sponsor buying those receptacles and then having their advertisement placed. Is that a possibility to take back to committee to explore for promotion? I guess it would save, every little bit saves money. Just
Mr. Ritchie, go ahead.
as the councillor has said, this is a trial period, but that would certainly be a suggestion we would look at. Every time we expand a service, we expand our costs. So I want to be a little cautious, but it's certainly something we would look at, absolutely.
Anyone else? So I'm calling the question on approval of the minutes. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So down to number 15, we have no postponed matters. Number 16, we have no motions. Discussion of additional business. Councillor Kepke.
Thank you, Worship. I have a question for staff, and I was wondering about the landscaping and if you could give an update on the Rogers Communication development on 9th Avenue East.
Through your worship, the City Council had approved a site plan for that development. The city does hold a security of $30,000 relating to that development to ensure that it is completed. They have a 2-year time frame under the site plan agreement to complete those works, so their completion is October 1, 2020. So in theory, they have a couple more planting seasons. We're certainly very hopeful that this fall that site will be finished, it will be landscaped and be an attractive part of 9th Avenue East. So it's not, it's certainly still very much a construction site. But we do have an agreement and an approved plan that does look good on paper.
Thank you. Can I go ahead and, okay.
It's
Just
only
a-
8:40, so yeah.
Just a very brief summary of my attendance at AMO. The opening speaker was on innovation and disruption, and one thing that I took away from what he said was he indicated there needs to be a greater role for government in economic change, along with the ability to provide funding to achieve that innovation. The Small Urban Caucus session was about school bus safety and the modernization of automated traffic enforcement. I attended a session on Policing 2020, where the focus was on community safety and well-being legislation, which is a proactive approach to the prevention of vulnerable individuals entering the justice system. I also attended a session on changes to legislation for conservation authorities with respect to Bill 108, where there was a presentation from Durham Region on their approach to changes, a presentation from the County of Frontenac respecting municipalities and memorandums of understanding for core services, and a presentation from Conservation Ontario regarding commitments to improvements and templates for the required MOUs. I attended a session on Ontario Business Improvement Area Association, and they made a presentation on Main Street accessibility, which was really quite interesting. I also took part in a delegation with the Grace Harbor Conservation Authority, where member municipalities and the County of Grey met with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and they identified that the regulations are soon to be released, and they will be allowing time for comments on those regulations further. And that's a summary of my attendance.
Good, thank you. Councillor Tamming?
Thank you, Your Worship. It was my first attendance at the AMO convention as well, which is in Ottawa, 2,400 delegates. I won't go over everything I attended, but I found it fascinating to share perspectives and views with municipal councils and their staff from around the province. I found the most powerful speech to be by the Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, Mr. Pierre Bellegrand, and it was a plea for the province to come together on a municipal level as well and work with Aboriginal youth and harness their energy and their future. And I found it a very compelling talk, and one with two First Nations close to Owen Sound that we could learn from. I'll write up a longer report, maybe for the local paper if they're interested in producing it. But again, I found it fascinating. Those people I talked to, I found the consensus very interesting. Most people I spoke to are very happy that producers of packaging will be stuck for the most part with the cost of dealing with that packaging. So it was a very nonpartisan issue there. A lot of concern about asset management plans and how we'll be able to sock away enough money to basically cover future depreciation and so forth. A lot of people are concerned about that, and the devil will be in the details in terms of what we're going to face as by way of regulation. I found it interesting that almost everybody agreed that we face a financial budgetary crisis and that spending has to be cut. But not me, not my police, not my paramedics, not conservation authorities, and not public health units. That was more or less the leave my own personal budget alone. And I was reminded St. Augustine years ago said in his famous prayer, "Lord, grant me chastity, but not yet." And I felt the theme of AMO was to some extent the prayer, "Lord, grant us fiscal responsibility, but not now." Those are my comments.
I think I'm next. So, first of all, it was quite an honor to have the Premier show up this past Saturday and attend the Salmon Spectacular. We're trying to remember the last time a Premier was in town, and we think it was David Peterson, which is pushing 30 years ago, that there was actually, we've had Premiers in the area, but actually in Owen Sound. So it's pretty special anytime you get the Premier or a Minister of provincial or federal government coming to our town and getting to show off us. AMO, I tended towards Zero Plastic Waste, which was the manager of Plastics for Canada Environment and Climate Change, as well as a region of Peel, City of Toronto, and Kingston. And the big message was that we have to have one central rule or system to picking up plastic and recycling it, so that it's none of these companies want to deal with individuals. Discard. Recycling, this was the Retail Association, as well as Food Manufacturers and Producers Association. Canadian Beverage Association are working towards a new plastic economy initiative, aiming for zero plastics in 2025. As they develop new products together, they will share them with other, they're not going to patent them, they're going to share them with other companies, et cetera, and people around the world to try and make it better. The goal is to reduce marine litter, supporting the circular economy. 90% of river discharge that's producing plastics into the ocean is coming from 10 rivers. They're all in Asia and Africa. On a plastic pollution, ocean pollution scale, Canada was 185th. I think 189th in the list of countries, and it was like China, Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia. They were all the top 5. This group especially was interested in the aluminum being recycled in 2 different types of plastic that they want, because they believe they can, needless to say, it's business, make money at it, and that's their goal. Cyber and climate change, that was actually by the insurance company, so they're talking about having plans for drainage plans and reducing our risk, basically, from an insurance point of view, lowering claims. So cyber and climate changes, I think they said, are no longer an emerging threat. They're here. Municipalities are getting broken into, their systems are getting broken into and held hostage for millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. Climate change, of course, we've already got a drainage plan for housing, et cetera, and new developments. Local economies in transition. This one was really interesting because they were talking about municipalities are land-based, property-based tax systems. As Blockbuster has been replaced by Netflix, as Sears have been replaced by Amazon, these different companies are no longer paying taxes in our community, and there's been a shift since 2001 to 2017, a 9% increase of, on average in Canada or Ontario, can't remember which, of residential taxes based on the drop-off of industrial and especially commercial taxes, and that's going to continue. So with unemployment or income decreases compounding this, infrastructure deficits and provincial deficits, one of the things they talked about that's important is collecting development charges. But can the property tax system continue to be municipal only? We already know that we're only getting 9 cents out of every dollar that's of tax that's being collected is going to municipal, and we're doing more and more, trying to do more and more with it. We met with the Minister of Education with regard to Georgian College on behalf of Grey County, as well as it was in on two other ones, but the one with Minister of Education was, I think, most, well, maybe not, it was one of the important ones for Owen Sound, if not the most important one of them. An interesting message that he had was think big, think bold. I don't want to hear about sustaining your college. I want to hear you talk about how you're going to compete. So that was pretty good. And of course, we were pushing the fact that we need a nursing program here, 4-year, and that it will work. So I'll have more details. I'll try and put together my reports and share them with council going forward on each of the events that I went to. But overall, I thought it was one of the best AMOs yet, of one, having a good selection of things to go to, and when you got there, the title actually fulfilled what the discussion was. It doesn't always happen. So that's my report. Right, wake up. Motion that the committee rise. I think that'd be you. Sorry.
Moved by myself, that the committee of the whole rise and report.
Well done. All in favor? That's carried. You're on a roll. Keep going.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Hamley, that the action taken in committee of the whole in considering public meetings, deputations and presentations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports of city staff, consent agenda, committee minutes, matters postponed, motions for which notice was previously given, and additional business be confirmed by this council.
All in favor? That's carried. Thanks. Notices of motion? Seeing none. Bylaws?
Through your worship, the bylaws listed for approval on tonight's agenda include the confirmatory bylaw, a bylaw to execute a fire protection agreement with Georgian Bluffs and Meaford on behalf of the Intertownship Fire Department Board respecting the closure of 10th Street Bridge. There are several license amendment bylaws with the Minister of Transport for the East Side Walkway, the floating dock, the West Side Walkway and Park, the pedestrian bridge, and the water intake pipe. And lastly, there's a bylaw to execute a facility use agreement for the Fall Classic Slow Pitch Tournament.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Hamley, that bylaw numbers 2019-144, 145, 146, 147, 148, 149, 150, and 151 be passed and enacted.
All in favor? That is carried. So with that, it completes our business for tonight. It is 8:51. We can adjourn. Thanks, everybody.